Thanks, Harrison. I tried to get to every screen. I was clicking on Zoom. So please, I understand my rating may be unfair, but Dane Stewart had the best dance moves for the opening song. And look, for those of you that are on the fence, is it okay to dance? Can I express myself? The answer is yes. Okay. Do you want to be a coach where your players can't be free? I mean, so much of the game is about letting players' talent come out. So, bottom line, lighten up, people. Okay, even if you haven't heard the song, nod the head a little bit, tap the foot. It'll do you some good, little dopamine hit. Also, if you did not get a chance to watch Costa Rica, Brazil last night, it was a master class in defending. Anybody get to catch the end of that game? Costa Rica was completely bought in to defending their territory, and that's going to make the next round of these games really exciting. All right, down to business. We have with us tonight my really good friend Marcie Schwartz. Marcie and I met a year ago. We're both coach, educator, developers with United States Soccer Federation. And I had the opportunity to spend a couple days with her and other colleagues at a FIFA course down in Florida last year. And as we were putting this event together, she popped into my mind as somebody who would be great for this audience. Let me tell you a little bit about Marcie. Marcie has spent over 8 years coaching Division I soccer. Marcie has won 2 gold medals in the Maccabi Games. She is a coach, educator, developer where she oversees 1,400 youth parent volunteers in Cleveland. And with her educator role with US Club Soccer, she is responsible for all the education and development of coaches doing grassroots and D licenses through US Soccer. Most importantly, she's a mom of 2 and is the one that suggested tonight's walkout song, one I've never heard before, and I'm going to try and memorize. Marcie, thanks for being here with us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ben. But you didn't tell them the most fun fact we found out is that Ben's son and I share a birthday. And we found that out as well because he had to leave the pilot early to go celebrate the birthday. Instead, he chose his son over my birthday. A little hurt, but we'll talk about it later. Thank you all for being here. I am so honored to have been asked to do this. Ben told me about this organization, and it's so amazing, truly, what all of you are doing, and that you are giving back to now players, right? In a way, you've all given to this country, and now you're giving back to players and trying to do it the right way, like Harrison said, which I think is wonderful. So today we are going to dig a little bit into systems of play. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to kind of jump right into it. So my first question I'd like to know, and we're going to use the chat. I like to be interactive. We do have a big group, so our interactions are going to be a little creative today. But using the chat, can you tell me, how would you define when I say systems of play? What does that mean to you? Put that in the chat for me. And there's no wrong answer. And if you have no idea, you can absolutely admit that as well. I probably did many years ago. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of different language used, which is great. I like, again, that we all have either, if we've heard of it, we've interpreted it in our own way. And that's going to be a foundation of what we're going to discuss today is there's not a complete right way to look at a system of play. And that's what we're going to break down. So a system of play, as we define it, is how the players are arranged on the field, also known as a formation. So to Ben's point about watching, the professional game, we could start to look specifically if we have really good TV cameras and a lot of technology, but you could start to look at how players are arranged on the field. And within that, we could start to recognize what system the team is playing. So next question I'd ask, and you could just put yes or no in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll kind of try and look through the side. As we coach, for those of us that have coached before, how many of us use a system? We recognize it and we use a system within our team. So you could put yes, or you can raise your hand. I'm seeing a lot of yeses come through. They use some sort of a system in some capacity, some sort of organization regarding how the players are arranged. And if not, that's okay. We're going to talk about that today. Good. I like that we talk about it varies team to team. We're going to actually get there. Depends on the players and the team. Y'all are taking my presentation away from me. I love it. Brilliant, brilliant. So what I want us to think about is how do we define who is in front of us regarding that system of play? So what we think about is when we're thinking of who is in front of us, we need to think about the players. And we think about the players in a lot of different categories, but we're going to talk mostly in the ages and stages that they come in, right? So we need to think about within this age, right? If we're talking about 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds, or no matter what the age is, what do we need to develop within this age? That could be categorized by a lot of different ways. We could think about it by something we watched in the game last week, right? And it didn't translate. We need to develop that. I like a lot of the words coming in. A lot of the fundamentals could be a component of what we're developing. Maybe it's something we have set. So by the time they're done with this year, they need to focus on this and develop this quality, right? Maybe we need to develop, where they are in the season. That's called periodization. So where within the season do we need to focus on what they need to develop? So that's one area we need to think about is what do they need to develop based on who's in front of us? Next, we need to think about how does our choice in formation impact that development? So based on what we choose as our formation, how might that affect the development of those players? And then third, and arguably most importantly, how does the game formation impact fun? Because if these players don't have fun, I saw a couple people, I see Eric even wrote love for the game, right? If these players don't have fun, if they don't leave with a smile on their faces, will they come back? And that's something we need to be thinking about, right? Is how can we keep this fun? To Ben's point, we need to be fun, dancing, enjoying ourselves, but we need to make sure that the environment we're creating is fun for the players in addition to development. So we've established 3 basic needs of players. Fun, development, and the idea of belonging are the 3 basic needs that we need to make sure that we're focusing on. So our goal when we're thinking of systems of play and formation is that can we create a fun environment that maximizes development based on who is in front of us? So the connection that we're going to have to that is that the level of challenge needs to be appropriate. If we make it too difficult, Timothy again took the words out of my mouth. I love it. We can't shove a square peg in a round hole, as he said, which is brilliant. It's can we make sure that the level of challenge is appropriate for who's in front of us? So we're not going to necessarily be able to create something in regards to deciding where players play and arranging them if they can't handle that. If we create the environment correctly, this is what will come out. So we'll have more engagement. The players will be excited to participate. We'll see more player actions in regards to the concept of the fundamentals and the technical components and dribbling or passing or shooting. We'll see more of that come out and more come out successfully, not just come out, right? But be able to be applied successfully. We'll allow more autonomy and that the players can make decisions themselves, which is our ultimate goal. Can we create problem solvers on the field? When we take that ability away from them, we're now not giving them that opportunity for creativity and to be able to solve those problems. We'll create more goals because who doesn't want to score goals? I haven't met a kid that doesn't not want to score goals. Yes, winning is fun. Absolutely, Jamie. Winning is fun. Right? We'll also create more support in regards to not only them realizing support from each other, but support on the field. Secondary people who are helping them out regarding attackers as they're going forward. And most importantly is that last one, we'll create more smiles. you take nothing else away from today, can every player leave with a smile on their face, right? That's what we're trying to think about. So it's important for us to remember that when we think about the idea of formation within systems of play, the formation is a starting point. And what do I mean by that? We put the players on the field, however we decide, right? We've talked about based on who's in front of us, based on the idea of fun, development, and belonging, in addition to, again, the environment that we're trying to create with the appropriate challenge. But at any point, if I stop that game and I could hit pause, it may not look like how it started. If you're dealing with the young ones, raise your hand if you deal with the really young ones, maybe like 5, 6, 7. It's just going to look like this for a lot of the game. I'm seeing a lot of smiles and nods. So our goal is to make it look a little bit more like this and separate a little bit. But the formation is a starting point. So we need to remember that. But at the same time, there can be value to introducing a formation so they understand where we want to go and what it should look like and can look like if they're paying attention to their roles and responsibilities positionally. So it's thinking about that. So now, how do we identify a formation? Is something we need to be thinking about. So as we're going through, you're going to read formations starting with the goalkeeper going up. So the first thing is every formation is going to start with the number 1, no matter what formation you have, unless you've pulled the goalkeeper, which then please invite me to your game because that's going to be a fun game to watch. But most of them are going to start with the number 1. If you play in a system of play or in a game format that has a goalkeeper, there are some that don't, and we're actually going to talk about that. But most of them are going to start with 1 because there's a goalkeeper. Next, you're going to look at the unit, which is what we call kind of the area of positions together, right? So the defenders would be considered a unit. The midfielders would be considered a unit. The attackers or the forwards would be considered a unit. So it would be a 1-2, just as an example that we're seeing. And then you'd be looking at your midfielders, which is 3, and then 1. So if this was a 7v7 game, right, 9 or 10-year-olds, and this is what we saw, this would be considered a 1, 2, 3, 1 formation is what we would be looking at. So that's something just in regards to, for us to realize, how do we read a formation? So again, a challenge to all of us is before a game start, whether it's your own game, whether it's a game you're watching on TV, depending on the aerial view that you have, can you look at the lines across the field regarding the positions and identify what is the starting formation? You'll hear the commentators talk about that a lot. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they don't get it right. And it's fun to be able to kind of have that argument or conversation regarding, what do you think it is? What do we think it is? Those of us that love soccer, that's a topic of conversation constantly. What formation do you think they're playing? But this is just how you read the formation. So what we want to look at next is going to be the progression of formation across the age groups. The reason that this is important is because no matter what age you coach, it's about thinking where you want the players to go and how can you connect them there. In our dream world, players play as long as possible until their bodies aren't able because they enjoy the game so much. They just want more, no matter what level. It doesn't necessarily have to be at Division I collegiate into the professional realm. It could be club. It could be recreational. It's just wanting to play the game. But within that, it's important that we build a great foundation starting in the 4v4 environment, working our way all the way up. Just for a kind of a check for understanding so I know where everyone is, can you put in the chat, and I'm seeing a bunch of questions, so I'm going to try and remember to come back and there's a spot for questions at the end as well. But put in the chat if you know, which many of you it sounds like might, how many players play at each of the 4 game formats. So if they're U8, if they're U10, if they're U12, and if they're U13 plus. You could put a yes or no. Do people know that the numbers change on the field based on that? This is just a check for understanding for myself to know where to go. Okay, it's a lot of yeses. So for some of you, this is just going to be a little bit of repeat information, but I'm seeing a couple of no's and a couple of maybes. So this is good for us to think about. But what we're going to look at is how it can be grown across the 4 levels. So at the younger levels, you're going to be looking at 4v4. U7 and U8 is kind of what we're looking at. We're going to get into a lot of what I'm seeing regarding the different formations. So hold your thought. I promise it's coming regarding different formations at different ages. But this is just to paint the picture of what it looks like. So we start with 4v4. After players age out of U7 and U8, they're going to bump into what we call 7v7. So how does this happen? One player shifts, we add a keeper, we add a defender, we add a midfielder. And there you go. And again, this is just one example. We're going to go into detail in a little bit about different options, but just so we could see how as we add players, it can grow into a formation so simply. So we started with our base of 4 with no goalkeeper. Mind you, for that U7, U8, there is not a goalkeeper. We add a goalkeeper, which is a change. There's other different laws of the game that get added and changed throughout. We're going to focus on the idea of just the positional rules right now. We're not going to be talking about build outline. We're not going to be talking about offsides. That will be a different conversation. We're focusing really on the system that the team is playing. So that's going to be our 7v7. So again, we shift a player over, we add 3 players, and we're looking at 7v7. From there, we shift a player, we shift a player, we move a couple more players, and we add 2 more. We go into 9v9, which is now 11s and 12s. Okay. So Eric, I do see your question in there. We could talk a little bit more about that, but the licenses that they're talking about is US Soccer does offer coaching courses, coaching education formally. That's something that we can hit at the end regarding where to find information on those. But the grassroots licenses, which are kind of the more or less foundational licenses, we'd call it, or the beginning of the pathway, the educational pathway, are based on these game formats. So if you want to learn more about not necessarily systems, but in general, oh, brilliant. Somebody Marty put it in there. You can find courses that offer more information about each of these specifically. To keep us going, that's 9v9. So again, easy change in our last one, which is going to be U13 plus. So everything above the age U13, up to college, up to professional, every age above 13 is going to have this. And all we're going to do, again, is just shift player, add player, add player. And then now we have our 11v11. So again, as we're looking at just how player formation looks like as we add players throughout the progression, it's important for us just to recognize it's just about movement. That's really what it boils down to. Player movement, player starting points, player movement. And then how do we define roles and responsibilities of position within that movement? So what we're going to do now is look a little bit deeper into each of the game formats. So as we go, we're going to again start at 4v4. There are different ones that you could play. Not a lot, unless if you're going to go 4 across the line and just hope we call that parking the bus, hope nobody could break your line. You could do it, see what happens, right? We don't know until we try. But the one you'll see most commonly used is a 1-2-1. Now, the one for this is not the goalkeeper, as you could see, because there is no goalkeepers in 4v4. So it would actually be a defender, 2 midfielders, and a forward. Now, can you play a 2-2 block or a 2-2 square? Sure. You don't see it as much, so I didn't put it on here. But there's really not a right or wrong. It comes back to our original conversation. Who is in front of you and what are their needs? How can we make the most of the environment for them? Which is why I was really excited to see a lot of you put in the chat, I don't know my formation until I know who's in front of me for that year. That's a great answer, because it's really hard sometimes for us to decide, unless if you're at a college or at a professional organization where you can recruit players in that meet those holes that you're missing. But if you can't, which is most of us, that we have to just take what we get, right? It's the idea of, can we start to identify what they have, each individual player, and how can we make that work on the field? Yes, 4v4 soccer, I call it beehive soccer. It is. It's about spacing, right? But if we can start to help players understand that there are rules and responsibility, there are positions, as loose as those terms may be, we could start to realize that we can teach it through this lens. you can use the basic idea of a formation and positions to help break up that beehive, break up that mosh pit of soccer that we see at the younger ages. Again, because they start to realize if the ball does the work instead of me going to the ball, it can help us in the process. So, thinking again about how we can get through this game using the formation. So, this is kind of the idea of 4v4. Now, when we get to 7v7, there's a couple of others. And again, there's a bunch that I didn't list. And I think it's important for us to realize that. As I mentioned also, we start in any of these formations and I pause your game and I take a picture. It might look something completely different based on where the players are at that moment. And that's okay. It's a starting point. It gets us going. So if we look at the left regarding 7v7, if we were at 1-2-1, and this was that movement or animated diagram I showed you, a 1-2-3-1 is a really easy connection to that because you just have to move a couple of players out of keeper and add your 3 players, and then you're good. But another option is a 1-3-2-1. I want to take a minute and I want you to look at the difference in shape. Okay? And we're gonna elaborate on this a little bit and more, but look at the difference in shape and start to think about why. Don't give me an answer yet because we're gonna get there, but start to think about why. So you have your 1-2-3-1 and your 1-3-2-1. You have to decide what you want to do. You have to decide how you want to play. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Yes, Ricardo, the flying V. I love that one. Great reference, great movie. So again, this is going to be in that 7v7. As we're moving into that 7v7, again, it's going to be about who's in front of us. So 4v4 age players are going to have different qualities than 7v7 age players. The field's going to get bigger. The ball's going to get bigger, right? Different rules and laws of the game are going to apply. So it's about deciding how you want your players to start to learn the game of soccer and how is the formation going to set up to be successful in that based on what our goals are, based on who's in front of us. As we look at the next one, we're going to start to think about the 9v9. So now there's more options. A lot of times when you go from 7v7 to 9v9 is when many people start to say that's when the technical game becomes tactical. Just in that introduction, because you have more options when you have more players on the field. So let's look at this for a minute. On the left side, you have the 1-3-2-3. So again, you look at the back, we have our goalkeeper, 3 defenders, 2 midfielders, and you could make a case they could be north-south, they could be side-to-side, they could be angled. They're still considered midfielders, so you'd count them as the 2. Where they're located would be up to you and how you teach them and how you coach them. So again, you could decide that you want them next to each other. You could decide you want them up and down. You could decide you want them angled. You could decide that. And then you have 3 forwards up top. So this is one way to think about it. Again, thinking about as we're moving from 7v7 to 9v9, what is changing? There's one big thing that changes at 9v9. Does anybody know what that is? Put it in the chat if you know. What changes when you go from 7v7 to 9v9? And this depends a little bit on where you're located because there are kind of rules or laws of the game that US Soccer puts forward and people change it. So I'm seeing a lot of offsides. However, there is a built-out line that is in 7v7 and there is offsides, but the location of offside changes. Yep, potentially, yep. Heading will now be introduced at the second half of 9v9. I'm looking to see if the build-out line disappears. Does anybody realize what changes or what gets added to the game at 9v9 that can impact? Oh, I saw it. Stuart put in punting. Punting is now allowed in 9v9. So think about how that could change the structure of the game and potentially the formation you want to play when the ball can bypass those units. Now, maybe some of us have a really, really good 10-year-old who can either throw it really, really far or put it really, really down and kick it hard and you could bypass it too. But normally, once you figure out the mechanics of punting, which that could be fun in our own right as a coach, but once they figure it out, it can change the game because it doesn't have to work through the units. Now you think about again your style of play, which is a different conversation. You may still want them to work the ball from the defense to the mid to the forward, play more possession style, we call that, where it's lots of passing, right? But you have the option, or teams have the option of punting. And so recognizing that may make you change how you set up your formation or how you decide your system should look. So our next one is a 1-3-3-2. Okay, so again, we have our 3 in the back. 3, here I put a triangle, but you could make an inverted triangle where you have 2 attackers and 1 in the back, so it could be a little bit more heavy up here. And then your 2. And the last one would be a 1-3-4. I went with a wide diamond. You could bring them in and have a smaller diamond, and 1. And now again, because we're going to have a conversation about this in a minute, take a look at these 3 and think about the differences. And start to think again, you don't need to put it in the chat yet. We're going to talk about it. Why would I pick one versus the other? What would be my reasons behind that? What might be my benefits of it? What might be my potential consequences of that? So we need to start to think about, as we're looking at it, we're going to get into the big one in a minute with 11v11, but how my choices as the coach could impact the game, could impact player, but could also impact those components we talked about regarding player development and fun. So just keep those in mind as we go into the last one. So now we have 11v11, and this is again just a sprinkle. There are many that I could not put on here because I could only fit so many on the screen. So this is just examples of different formations. So you start in one that we do see a lot, specifically within some of our national teams, as well as a lot of international play, is the 1-4-3-3. And again, it connects to that animated diagram in regards to movement. So again, it's 4 in the back, 3 in the midfield, 3 up top. Now, again, how those midfielders are displayed, that could vary. You could have them in a straight line across. You could have them as a triangle this way. You could have them as a triangle this way. There's a lot of different ways it could look. But just thinking about the units is the numbering that we're looking at. Another option is a 1-4-4-2. This one I find being around the youth game a lot is the one that's, once you go into 11v11, it's a starter formation for many. It's a starter formation for many. Doesn't mean where you end up, doesn't mean it is for everybody, but from what I found watching a lot of youth soccer and coaching a lot of youth soccer over the years, 4-4-2, 1-4-4-2 is what you see a lot of as kids advance into U13. So it's interesting to just kind of see that be a trend when people are going forward. So again, we have 1 in the back, 4 across the back line, 4, again, I made a wide diamond. You can make it a tight diamond, and then 2 up top. Okay, and again, the 2 up top could be north-south, east-west, which is how I drew it here, or you could have angles. So the starting position, again, is kind of up to how you teach it. The next one is a 1-4-5-1. So again, start to think about the differences between the 1-4-3-3 on the left side and the 1-4-5-1, that third one, and just start to look at where are we number heavy, where are we not, and potentially why. We're going to talk about this, but think about it. And the last one is a 1-3-5-2. So we've taken a defender out, but added a number in the midfield. Again, thinking about the why. What could that open up and expose for us? What could that not? So these are just examples kind of as we go through. Again, there's a lot of other ones. There's a 3-4-3. There's a lot of different ones. I've seen you could make a case for a 1 in the back and then 10. Everybody in the box, parking the bus when I coach collegiately, that was a fun one to try and break up. But it's interesting as we go through. So what we need to look at though, and again, this is just an example, is how is it connected across the ages? And within is it connected across? Thinking again about why is it important they connect? Can anybody put in the chat, why do you think it's important that we connect across the ages regarding the formation? Nate, you put in there, it's less confusing to learn. Do you mind unmuting and telling me what you mean? Elaborating a little bit?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of times from my own watching my own kids play in their clubs and starting out at like their U8, U9 and working their way up, that certain formations kind of bleeds into other formations that look very similar to them. And so like the positions for them understanding, okay, because my kids like to be defenders. You say everybody like the scores. My kids don't like the score apparently. They just to play defense. That's all they do.
Sure.
But they kind of understand their position on the field and they like, hey, I know if I go here, I got this kind of range and this is my zone. And like, and they kind of understand it. And it's easier for them to pick it up when you add extra players and you kind of fit them where it looks similar to the one they just learned. And so that's why I said that.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's important though, right? And especially like you said, thank you for sharing, Nate, and specifically thank you for sharing, how your kids look at it, which is our why, right? Is in regards to the lens of the kids and their experience. So thank you for that. But for all of us, right, thinking about how, does what they enjoy connect as well. So for Nate, his kids like playing defenders. So finding that commonality across and making sure there's still a home and a role for that is important. I'm looking through here. Marcellus, you mentioned the word progression. Do you mind elaborating on that? I don't know if you're able to. If not, no
Hello?
problem. Yes.
Yeah, I say progression because knowing the kids and knowing how to build the play and to connect to get through to them, basically you can't be stagnant in how you do it per se, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Give the standard, let them go for it, play with it, and then from there go to the next set and then see if they're continuing to grow. But if they're not getting it and having fun and playing and doing it, then they're not going to develop and get where you need to go to get your end state.
Yep. Yep. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Right. For us to be able to realize that almost starting with the end in mind, even if they don't realize that. It's a powerful thing that you said, Marcellus, where can we set them up for success as they're moving forward? We as coaches know it's going to go to 11v11. So can we almost work backwards to make that a natural and easy progression, to use your word, where they don't recognize there's much change besides more players on the field? And it really boils down to roles and responsibilities. Fun fact, I have actually coached multiple teams where I did not teach a formation. I know, what am I even saying? But I didn't. Instead, I explained rules and responsibilities of the position, and then they naturally fell into it. So if I said, okay, I need a right back, a left back. Okay, here's what you need to do in those positions. Here's how you support the players in front of you. Here's where you are when we're attacking. Here's where you are when we're defending. We do practices with that. And then I say, okay, I'm going to have one center back. Okay, here's what you need to do. Here's where you're going to be. Boom. They go out. Well, now we're in a 3-back. Did I call it, hey, we're going to start in a 1-3, whatever? No, I just told them what their roles and responsibilities are. Within that and the understanding of roles and responsibilities as well, they start to recognize that I need somebody to play right back. So if I have my buddy Ben, who is really excited to dribble the ball forward, is playing right back, and he starts to go forward, we recognize as a team, well, wait a second, we still need somebody to play that role for us. So maybe I could shift there because Ben has now come into my space. So now your right mid shifts back and your right defender goes forward. And the players can start to recognize that. It doesn't have to be us telling them what to do. So it's starting to realize that if we can not only use formations as a guide, but connect it with roles and responsibilities of position, it can help players start to understand the fluidity of the game. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, what is our ultimate goal? Create problem solvers. I always joke that if I have, when, especially at the older ages, if I could have 11 little coaches on the field and I could sit back and do nothing because they're taking over the game regarding movement, regarding decision, regarding style of play, that's success in my book. The best thing in the world is when I could sit back and just watch the game happen and unfold because the players take ownership. And it could start through the lens of system and understanding what we want to do, why we want to do it, and how we're going to do it. So now we think about, I've kind of led into this question a little bit. What does the game formation tell us? So when we have a game formation, it tells us how we line up, right? Our starting point we talked about. It can tell us player positions and positional roles and responsibilities. So again, we watch it, we see it, but it could start to tell you based on the movement of that player, as long as you've coached it, broke it down by unit, discussed it, you could start to see, how are we playing? What's the role of that player? What do we want to see them do? Right? Are they doing it? It could be a check for understanding of ourselves. And if they understand, like I see a lot of people talking, if we're going to play an attacking style and I want my defenders to get forward a little bit, and I don't want them just to sit back, are they doing it? Do they understand when? Do they understand why? And then this is an important one. And I want, put in the chat for me, what do you think I mean when I say it connects players on the field without soccer context? What do you think I mean when I say that? It connects players on the field without soccer context. Brandon, you said it gives them identity. What do you mean by that?
I think by giving the kids identity, helps them to develop what are they doing in the field, like to know their own positions, or like what they can do and then what they can bring. So if they give an identity of what they can do, they'll start feeling more responsible on it.
I love that. I love that. Right? So it helps them understand what their role is and that they have an important role. And that comes back to fun. It's more fun when you're a part of something, right? When you can play a role in something, when you're connected to something potentially bigger than yourself. I think that's wonderful. Thank you, Brandon, for sharing that. Thinking also, again, when we say it connects them to each other without soccer context, right? So what does that mean? Actually, I'm going to go, Brett, you said puzzle pieces fit together. What do you mean? Can you elaborate on that one? I like how you said that.
Yeah, if you're teaching the players their roles and responsibility, they're a piece of the puzzle. They only have to necessarily understand the small scope of their piece of the puzzle. They don't have to actually see the whole context right away. So when they do their job well, and the piece next to them does their job well, and the piece in front of them does their job well, the next thing you know, you're building the soccer game without them having to overthink everything.
I love that, right? So we talk about who's in front of us, what can they handle? If we give them too much, some players at the ages can't handle that. Some players at the older ages can't handle that, let alone the little ones, right? So, Brett, I love how you looked at it as almost chunking it, right? Giving them a little bit or a scaffold. We give them a little and then it layers in, right, as we go more. And you mentioned something else, Brett, which I think is of noteworthy to bring up, where you talk about that they start to recognize how the person next to them connects to them. The person in front of them connects to them. The person behind them connects to them. So the idea of puzzle pieces is a great visual. I also think it's like a rope that they're all connected to, right? One person moves, we all move. And by starting to teach that shifting and movement without the ball, without opposition, and them realizing it, that by us being in this formation and just looking at it like you just did, in regards to what it looks like with the little dots or triangles, whatever we use, thinking about how now soccer is the vehicle for understanding. The game is the vehicle for understanding. So we can think about it, right, as we go through each of those pieces. We're going to take it deeper because I've been seeing in the chat a lot of people have some good understanding with it. So we're going to now talk about our style of play in basically how do you want soccer to look for your team? If I showed up to your game, you're coaching, whatever age group you're coaching, and I show up, what would you hope it looks like based on your teaching, based on your coaching, based on your formation? So what I want to do is a little activity for a couple of minutes. I'm putting two formations out. These are two of the 7v7. Look at the left and look at the right. I want you to decide which one you would play with your team and why. We don't have the context of the people in front of us, and that's okay. It's more, if you're choosing that one, why are you choosing that? And put that in the chat for me. You could pick either one. I'm gonna ask somebody, I'm gonna look through this list. I'm gonna pick somebody who picked one on the left, and they'll explain. And then I'm gonna pick somebody who picked one on the right, and they'll explain. So let's start with Jamie Flynn. I see you picked the 1, 2, 3, 1. Can you give us a 30-second of why you picked it?
I picked it mainly for, we have one attacker up there in the youth level up here. We're going to have more kids that are going to play herd ball. So this way we contain any type of strike that's going to want to come down from anybody that's having a heavy striker type of presence, because, you know, in where we're at here in Georgia, there's a lot of kids that want to just get out and score the ball or just shoot it far. So, and what we like to do with our age group is actually try to contain the ball and control it more. And this right here, with a good heavy midfield, and a solid defensive presence right here, we're able to contain the ball better and control the game. That's the reason why I chose that one.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. I like herd ball. I'm going to start to use that one as well. I have the visual right in my head when you said it. I'm like, yep, I know exactly what that looks like. Thank you, Jamie. All right, now I'm going to see if there was anybody who picked the other one. All right, I'm going to, Tejas, did I say it correctly? Tejas?
Yes, Tejas Patel.
Tejas, I'm sorry, I apologize. Can you tell me why you would pick the 1, 3, 2, 1?
I like the 1-3-2-1 for a number of reasons. One, I like to make sure that we're solid on a defensive standpoint. So I like the fact that there's 3 defenders back there, but also the wing backs could join in the attack and move forward. And I like that versatility, and also keeping numbers in the middle as well.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for sharing. So it's interesting, right? In regards to no context, you don't know the kids in front of you. We're probably thinking of our own team a little bit, but if I just said, which one do you like? Now, we're going to do what's called a weight chat. So we're going to challenge, see how many are on the call now? 154. Can we all listen? Let's see how this works. So I'm going to give you a context now, and I want you to tell me which one you would pick. Okay. So we are losing 2-0 with 5 minutes to go. Don't put it in yet. Don't put it in yet. We are losing 2-0 with 5 minutes to go. Which formation do you pick? Go. Okay. So a lot of us said the 1, 2, 3, 1. Great, because we have more numbers in the attack. We need to score a goal. We're down. We got to score. So we don't have as many in the back. So we're sacrificing the defense a little bit to get us forward. Okay. Now we're winning 2-0 with 5 minutes to go. Which formation are we playing? Now we're winning, or we're winning 2-0. Some are saying no change, which you could make a case for that potentially. But if we want to keep the win, we may decide, doesn't mean we always will, we may decide to add more numbers in the back, right? Now, again, you might keep it as is if that's something that you know, but this is where we could start to think about in regards to the why we might choose it. We may want to change our formation a little bit based on what's happening in the game, but it's our identity. It's based on who we are, not always based on who's in front of us. So just for us, things to think about. So as we wrap it up, and I love these comments. I want to go back and read everybody's comments. These are wonderful. Things for us to think about, right? Is again, who is in front of us is really important. Can we make it about the player and not about us? So it's not necessarily what I want to play. It's what can they play? What will bring out the best version of my team and my players? Not about me. I can have a favorite, but if I do it, is it going to make their environment what we want it to be? How is fun established through the system of play? Fun. It's a word we forget sometimes, but it's an important word, right? And then how can we teach positional rules through the formation? Can we make it creative, fun, and maximize development. But the most important thing, remember the why. And what's our why? The players. What's our why? Why are we coaching? Why are we here? For the players. So that's the most important thing for us to remember. And I got the wrap it up note. So I don't know if we have any time for questions. I don't know, Ben, if you want to open it up or you want to keep some, and however you want to do it. But Ben, I will turn it back to you.
Passing to Harrison. Marcie, thank you.
Yeah, Marcie, that was awesome. Thank you so much.